And now, it's time for the Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin.
Hello, listeners. I hope you had a very happy and safe 4th of July. Did you get in some extra reading over the holiday weekend? I am really loving my current read, which was written by one of the authors I've had right here on this show. Today, we're going to be talking to Denice Perkins. That's Denice with a C, D-E-N-I-C-E Perkins. She's a contemporary author who writes stories with deep messages that point readers to Christ. She's also one of my local writing friends, and I look forward to helping you get to know her too. Before we begin, I would appreciate it if you would take a moment to follow me on social media. You can find me at author Erin Mifflin. I absolutely love introducing you to some of these amazing Christian fiction authors, and I have a great lineup of guests over the coming months. I don't want you to miss it. Now let's bring in today's guest. Well, hello, Denice, and welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you're the author of the When series, When Wounds Heal and When Love Overcomes. And these are contemporary Christian fiction stories with romance. So tell us about your first book, When Wounds Heal.
When Wounds Heal begins as a story about a young man named Jedediah. He's 17 years old, and he has suffered abuse from his drug-addicted parents his entire life. What he wants more than anything is to love and be loved, but he's not sure that real love exists. The deaths of his parents left him abandoned and scared. His neighbors took him in, took him to church. Their minister gave him a Bible that he wholeheartedly rejected, in that he could not believe that any God existed if he would allow him to suffer the way he had. The blurb says, when Jedediah meets the beautiful, faith-filled Maggie, his scarred heart tells him that she is the chance to have what he desires the most. But to be loved and have love, the kind of life he dreams of, he has to find a way to forgive God and take a leap of faith, or let his fear consume him and control him the rest of his life.
So those are some really deep themes there. And I know it's hard just from seeing people in my own life, when they don't have the example before them of what love looks like or what healthy relationships look like. That can be really hard, and hard for them to know how to function because they've never had that healthy pattern in front of them. Yeah, so it's just a really tough topic. Did you have to do much research about it to really understand your character?
Some, but not as much as you would think. In my extended family, there have been those who have experienced some traumatic childhood abuse. I drew from those experiences. They were relayed to me over the years. Mm-hmm. Jedediah's story is not theirs, but I have seen the scars and devastation left by that kind of trauma, as well as the struggle involved with getting to the other side. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the emotional scars simply don't fully heal, and sometimes the other side's never reached.
Mm. Yes, that is true. And it can only really be reached with the help of Jesus.
Absolutely.
So now your next book, When Love Overcomes, does that continue with the same characters?
It does. Their story, it takes the third book in the series to actually get to the end of their story.
Okay. So life can still be so tough, even when we're making good choices and we're trying to get to the other side like you're talking about. And your tagline is leading people to Christ through storytelling. Have you found hope in life through Jesus yourself?
Yes. I know we've shared kind of my family's story a little bit through, actually, I think it started through meeting Joel. We've had losses that could have profoundly affected marriages and the family as a whole, but especially with my grandson's severe injury from near drowning. Mm-hmm. In the first 2 weeks after the accident, we were told he was going to die 3 times. Mm-hmm. We prayed for his healing, knowing that it could be the ultimate healing.
Right.
We are forever grateful that God's plan for our Thomas included him staying on earth with us. Thomas had multiple chest tubes and spent several days on ECMO. The ECMO did the work for his lungs and gave his lungs time to rest and heal. He spent a total of 66 days in the hospital. His treatment was unique and documented in medical journals. His care changed the way care is provided to near-drowning victims. He has some anoxic brain injury that left him with cerebral palsy. He'll celebrate his 16th birthday this October.
Wow.
He's happy and healthy and has helped innumerable children to survive what used to be considered the unsurvivable. Only God could use such a tragic event for so much good and give us back a child in the process.
Yes. The Lord really is good, and He does use these things that are so, so hard. You would not have chosen this ever for Thomas, and yet God in His wisdom has helped you along this path. Now, just to come back to your stories a little bit, your covers are gorgeous. They look like movie posters. The first time I saw them, that's what I thought. I'm like, well, that looks like a movie poster. And I know there's a story there because those were not the original covers. So why did your covers get a redesign?
It was actually only the cover for the first book, When Wounds Heal, that had to be redesigned. I used a cover artist, and between the time she designed the cover for When Wounds Heal, she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and went to spend eternity with the Lord.
So yeah, that's another story that was not something that we would have chosen. And so I am thankful that you were able to get covers now that can match the rest of the series. And in the process, they just tie together really beautifully, as I'm sure they would have if the original cover designer had been able to continue with that.
She was a wonderful lady to work with.
So you just recently wrote the end on the next book of the series, the third book. And as you mentioned, this is kind of the one that wraps up the series. Is that right?
Actually, it's not the third book. It will end up being the first book. It's like a prequel novel.
Okay, right.
It's the story of Maggie's parents and her uncle and aunt, how they fell in love and came together to start the business that in When Wounds Heal gave Jedediah a job and a future and a home.
Okay, very nice. I've done that before in my writing, where you write one story and then it's like, oh, this kind of needs a prequel story. So that's good. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get into writing?
Well, it wasn't actually intentional. The short answer is because God gave me a story. You want the long answer?
Sure.
Writing was not anything I intended to do. I had this recurrent dream for weeks and months. Finally, I began to write it down. Once it was written, the dream stopped. A teacher friend read this horrible, interminable first draft. And this was the feedback she gave me. You have a good story with well-developed characters, and now you need to learn how to write it.
Well, I've heard another person who got similar feedback that said, you have the basics, like you have a good storytelling foundation, we just have to learn how to tell it. And you're also not the first person I've heard who started writing because of a dream. That actually seems like it's more common than you might think. So you and I met last year through our local writing group, but I realized in reading your bio on your website that there's a lot about you that I don't know. So for example, you have 15 grandchildren. What a delight. Do they live close to you?
They do. 9 of them live within 2 miles of us. Soon, 3 of them will live next door.
Oh.
3 of those 9. Our house is sort of set up like a duplex. The older part of our home had some water damage several years ago. We were only able to mitigate what had to be done. We were never able to start the remodel. And those 3 boys are going to remodel it and make it their home.
Well, that's exciting.
There's another grandson that is married. He and his wife live in Carterville. We have a granddaughter that lives in Joplin and 4 others that live in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And I'm going to be a great-grandma right after the first New Year.
Oh, congratulations. It'll be the first one?
First one.
That's exciting. Now, you also have worked at so many different jobs, and you went to nursing school as an adult. What can you tell us about your jobs, and which one was your favorite?
I was just one of those people who could never quite decide what she wanted to do when she grew up. When I first went to college, I majored in math and music because I thought I wanted to be a teacher, and I found out that was not my calling. Then I went back and did a business degree and worked as an office manager for several years for a steel company, and then got an office manager position at a dental office. And he did in-house training for dental assisting, and I fell in love with the surgical procedures. And when he retired, I decided that maybe nursing was what was next. So I went back to school again. And out of all of it, nursing is probably my favorite, but not all of nursing.
Yeah, some of that's pretty tough.
I did hemodialysis and I hated it,
Oh,
to be
man.
honest.
Yeah.
But home health nursing was what I loved. I
Oh,
got to
yeah.
know my patients and got to serve them on a one-on-one basis. And if I needed extra time with a patient, I could take it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved encouraging, teaching, and caring for them. I once had a patient ask me about providing toenail and foot care. He wondered how I could do something like that for people. I told him if Jesus could wash his disciples' feet, I could provide foot care for my patients.
Yeah, that's a very special calling and a very special ability to be able to do that, because not everyone could go there. And I also liked how you had wrote on your website, and also just you said it just now, that you fell in love with the surgical side of dental practice, which I just think that was just kind of interesting. You know, I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say something like that they fell in love with the surgical side of something.
Well, it was just interesting, especially when we did implants, how he was able to harvest the bone from the jaw to put on the implants before he placed them so that they would heal and become part of the bone.
Mm-hmm.
The things that God has enabled men to do over time is just amazing to me.
Yeah. So you mentioned on your website that you enjoy gardening, cooking, baking, and crafts. So that just kind of piqued my interest. What kind of crafts do you do?
I used to be a seamstress, and I say used to because I made my daughter's formals and I made a wedding dress, and I've done alterations recently, but now I don't even own a sewing machine. I gave it to my daughter-in-law. And when she makes a quilt, I go over and help her.
Mm-hmm.
I've made a kitchen cornice box for my daughter using paint stir sticks.
Oh, yeah.
Most recently, I made 18 4-foot tall birthday candles to decorate my son's yard for my grandson's 18th birthday surprise party.
So you made, wow, that sounds like quite an experience.
But it's a dowel rod in the center of a foam pool tube thing. I don't know what you call them exactly. But basically, you cut them in half, put the dowel down the center, and then you put a flame, and I put glitter all over it so it'd be shiny, on the top of the dowel, and you have a birthday candle.
How fun. That's a great
So
idea.
it took 9 foam.
Are they pool noodles?
Yes, pool noodles. That's what they are. To make the 18 candles.
Uh-huh. Wow. That sounds fun. Was it a surprise for him?
It was a surprise birthday party for one of the grandsons.
Yeah, I bet he loved it.
He was definitely surprised.
So, as you mentioned, you and I connected more personally after I met my future husband, Joel, who is totally blind. And before that, you and I had known each other as fellow writers, and we'd had conversations about that and had gone to, our different topics and workshops that we have in our local group. But then when I met my husband, you and I had a chance to have some more conversations about that, as you have a son who is legally blind, and then my husband is totally blind. So Joel has been a huge source of inspiration for me and our church family. And have you found the same with your son?
Scott actually grew in his faith for the Lord more after his diagnosis than he did before. The disease he has is called keratoconus, and what it does is it points and dimples the cornea so he has multiple focal points. He became a part-time minister. He filled in for our minister when he was unable to be there, and grew to where he did our Wednesday night Bible studies. But at present, his eyesight has deteriorated. He can no longer study, teach, and preach. He sees his cornea specialist again in October, at which time they're planning on making arrangements for doing a cornea transplant on his left eye. There's an extended recovery period following the procedure, but once recovered, it should improve his vision again.
All right. Well, that's something that we can be praying for. I know that is a very difficult surgery. So we can pray that he can receive some of his sight again. I know, so my husband was blind from birth. Him and his twin sister, they were born prematurely. And their mom learned Braille so that she could teach them Braille. And, that's something that you don't see a whole lot anymore, but, that is something that is out there and that is available. And, of course, there's audio. My husband loves listening to audiobooks or listening to the Bible on audio and things like that. So there's definitely resources out there, but I personally, it's so hard for me to imagine a world without being able to see, and yet here they are, and God has allowed them to overcome these things in their lives to still be, a wonderful part of society and someone who can help others and influence others. And someone who is able to have just as deep and rich, if not deeper and richer, walk with the Lord because of their dependence on Him.
Well, Scott laughs at me sometimes because he's adapted so well that most of the time he functions well enough that I forget there are things he can't see. And he'll have to say, "Mom, stop. I need to put my hand on your shoulder so you can guide me and tell me where the steps are."
I have that too. Like if we're getting ready to go somewhere, I'll hold out my hand to Joel and then I'll be like, "Why isn't he taking it?" I'll be like, "Wait, I have to actually touch him or tell him, here's my hand." And you just forget, they're just who they are. Their lack of eyesight does not define who they are at all. And here's a funny story for you. On Sunday night, we were sitting in church and all of a sudden the power went out because we had a windstorm here. And so we were in the middle of the service and just all of a sudden the auditorium goes dark and everyone gasps, but not Joel. He says, "What happened?" All he knew was that everyone gasped. It didn't change anything for him that the lights went out. So is there a scripture that has been meaningful to you recently?
I chose 1 Corinthians 24 through 27. It says, "Do you not know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. They do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into submission, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." For me, the verse speaks to perseverance, goals, and always striving to overcome our weaknesses. It also tells me there's a prize worth all the struggles, the imperishable crown.
Yes. Yep. And sometimes the way is hard, and sometimes pressing on is not what we want to do. But if we can keep that in mind, the goal, that there's something ahead, that this is not, the struggle is not all that there is. And that's a good verse and a good source of encouragement. So I wanted to ask you, how can readers find your books and connect with you?
Well, my books are on Amazon in 3 formats: ebook, paperback, and hardback. Additionally, the ebooks are available through Kindle Unlimited to the Kindle Unlimited subscribers. My Amazon author page is amazon.com/author/Denice Perkins, no spaces. My Facebook author page is Denice Perkins, Christian author.
Very nice. And then do you have a website as well?
The author website is DenicePerkinsAuthor.com. Additionally, I have accounts on Instagram and TikTok. It's at Denice Perkins Author.
So you are on TikTok. That's one that I have never ventured onto. So do you do videos on there?
Most of my posting is actually just graphics with Bible verses and music.
Okay.
Sometimes I do book promotion. I actually put the promo for this on TikTok. And actually, I have got more response and followers quicker on TikTok than I have on any other platform.
Okay. So if any listeners out there are on TikTok, they can go find you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, I hope that they will go check out your works and get to see those beautiful covers and read these deep stories that you have poured your heart into.
I hope so too.
Listeners, please do go to DenicePerkinsAuthor.com to find out more about Denice's books, as well as all the other social media spots she mentioned. And remember, that's Denice with a C, Denice. I think that's wonderful that her books are on Kindle Unlimited. That is also, it's a great tool for authors as well as for readers to reach a greater audience. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, just go and check those out. When Wounds Heal and When Love Overcomes. And there's more coming soon from Denice. Another contemporary author who writes similarly to Denice would be Carrie Walker. And she writes stories that are really about those who are overlooked by society often, like young ones who have special needs or the elderly with dementia, those who are kind of on the fringes and are not going to be at the forefront when you're just out in the world. But these people have such value, and they have the ability to really touch hearts and lives for those who are willing to get to know them and to be a part of their lives and to reach out to them. And so Carrie Walker is someone else that I would definitely recommend if you like Denice's books. And you can find out more about Carrie on Amazon. Her books are also on there. And she has also been a guest on this show before. So if you go to my YouTube channel, which is author Erin Mifflin, and just scroll for Carrie Walker, you will be able to find her there. As I was thinking about the themes that Denice mentioned in her books, another author that came to mind was Ashlyn Michaela Ohm. That's O-H-M for her last name. She's written a series called Climbing Higher that also deal with some issues of abuse or those who have struggled. It's about some sisters, and each one of them has gone through some things. And there's one thing that I really appreciate about Ashlyn's books is the faith themes are really, really deep. And I would just recommend them for anyone, especially if you happen to be a fan of figure skating, because the heroine is a former competitive figure skater, and that does play into the story a little bit. So it's a trilogy, Climbing Higher, and she is another one who we've had on the show. So you can also find that on my YouTube. And Ashlyn's books are also on Kindle Unlimited. So be sure to check those out. Ashlyn Michaela Ohm. Another one who only has 3 books out, but they are each so good and they have impacted a lot of readers already, is Sarah Brunswold. Her first book, The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp, just really came onto the scene and touched a lot of hearts. And the book I referenced reading at the beginning of this show is her latest, The Atlas of Untold Stories, which is about a mom and 2 adult daughters going on a road trip. And as they venture around the literary sites in the heartland of America, well, they have their own stories that are needing to be shared. They each have secrets, but as they go along, you know these secrets are going to end up coming to light. Sarah's writing is just so gentle and so engaging. So be sure to look up Sarah Brunswold, and guess what? You can also find an interview with her on my YouTube. I would be completely remiss when talking about contemporary Christian fiction if I did not mention Katie Powner. Katie's books are just amazing. They really look below the surface. For example, her book, The Wind Blows in Sleeping Grass, is about a garbage truck driver. And you know the saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure? I have never seen that so vividly when it comes to people as in this story. Because Pete the garbage man, he sees people differently because he sees what they get rid of and what they value. And he is also able to see in people things of hidden value. And he's not a polished person. He has a rough past, but his insight into the world was so interesting to me. And this is a story that stayed with me for a long time, as all of Katie's books have. So there's a lot to check out with her books. I would highly recommend them for anyone who just loves this contemporary style that just really gives you a lot to think about as you read and always points you in the direction of hope. Another author who writes books with deep themes that I really appreciate is Becky Wade. Now, hers are more romance, but she has just some really good stories out there, and a lot of them also have threads of mystery woven in that really brings you in and kind of ties it all together. And of course, there's also another contemporary author that many will be familiar with, and that's Denise Hunter. And again, hers might be more light and more on the romance side. But if you enjoy contemporary Christian fiction, that is another one that you can check out. If you are interested in learning more about my story and how I met my husband Joel, we met last summer, actually, and I've been writing about that on my blog, which you can find on my website, author.erinmifflin.com. Just click on blog there, and you'll be able to see those entries about our love story and how God brought us together. I was not expecting to fall in love with a blind man, and yet God has just brought us together and has worked all these things out, and we are so grateful for each other. And we are looking forward to what God has in store for our future as we continue to seek Him together. Along with my website, which is author.erinmifflin.com, you can also find me on Facebook or Instagram at author Erin Mifflin. If you are on my website checking out my blog post, I would appreciate it if you would also sign up for my monthly newsletter. It would just be great to have you along for that journey. Also, if you follow me on social media, you'll be able to stay in the loop about who our next author guests will be. And I look forward to bringing you those interviews soon. Until next time, happy reading.
Join us next week for another episode of The Well-Read Llama with your host, author Erin Mifflin. If you'd like to find out more about author Erin Mifflin, visit her Facebook and Instagram accounts.